Washington, D.C., this is the Muslim News on Muslim Network TV. Assalamu alaikum, I'm Hena Zuberi. First, the headlines. Justice Department charges Oath Keepers with sedition. Biden unsure voting rights agenda will pass. Illinois to mark Muhammad Ali Day per new state law. UN official slams harassment of Indian Muslim woman. Islamic Bank launches $1 billion financing plan to back renewable energy. And our top story tonight. The U.S. Justice Department said yesterday it has charged the leaders of the far-right Oath Keepers militia and 10 others for their involvement in the January 6th Capitol Hill attack. Stuart Rhodes, the group's leader and founder, was arrested Thursday in Little Elm, Texas. A federal grand jury in Washington, D.C. indicted Rhodes and 10 other defendants Wednesday with seditious conspiracy and other charges. The seditious conspiracy charge carries a statutory maximum of 20 years in prison. More than 725 individuals have been arrested on charges related to the Capitol riot. In related news, the House Select Committee investigating the Capitol attack subpoenaed Twitter, Google, Facebook, and Reddit on Thursday for records relating to the insurrection. President Joe Biden on Thursday said he's not certain his voting rights agenda will pass the Senate after he failed to secure sufficient backing from his own Democratic Party. Immediately after a last-ditch meeting to persuade party members, Biden said he hoped we can get this done, but I'm not sure.
It's about election subversion, not just whether or not people get to vote. Who counts the vote? That's what this is about. That's what makes this so different than anything else we've ever done.
President Biden traveled to Capitol Hill to deliver a final, forceful appeal for action. U.S. Senator Joe Manchin III of West Virginia seemed moved by the president's speech.
The president gave an extremely, very passionate, very good speech. It was very human, and it was very touching. It was very good, and it was very historical, very historical.
Yet, despite president's efforts, the voting rights bill is likely doomed. Manchin and U.S. Senator Kristen Sinema of Arizona are opposed to eliminating the filibuster. In another setback to the president, the U.S. Supreme Court conservative majority blocked a Biden administration rule requiring 80 million workers to get COVID-19 vaccine shots or periodic testing. The court, however, allowed the administration to proceed with a vaccine mandate for most healthcare workers in the U.S. Meanwhile, hospitals have filled up in 24 U.S. states as COVID Omicron variant continues to spread. More than a dozen national Jewish organizations are calling for an additional $1 billion in funding for Israel. That's in addition to the more than $3.8 billion Israel already receives from U.S. taxpayers. Israel has received more U.S. funding than any other nation, on average, 7,000 times more per capita. The groups want more money to fund the Israeli military defense system against Palestinians' largely homemade rockets. Palestinian rockets have killed 39 Israelis, while Israeli air attacks on Gaza have killed more than 4,000 Gazans. Israel's weaponry is vastly superior to those wielded by Palestinian groups resisting confiscation of their land and a crippling blockade affecting Gaza's 2 million people. On January 17th, Illinois will for the first time mark Muhammad Ali Day along with Martin Luther King Day. The Illinois Muslim Coalition worked to get Muhammad Ali Day recognized statewide. The move is a part of a new state law that requires history courses to include the study of the contributions made by Muslim Americans and people of different faiths. It also requires public school educators from kindergarten through 8th grade to include in the curriculum Muslim, Jewish, Christian, Hindu, Sikh, Buddhist, and other faith traditions. The legislation was sponsored by State Senator Laura Ellman and State Representative Will Guzzardi. It became law on August 19th. In international news, UN Special Rapporteur on Minority Issues, Dr. Fernand de Varnez, took to Twitter over the social media harassment of Indian Muslim women. Varanasi asked that the culprits be prosecuted. His remarks came amid recent shock and furor over the Bully Buy app. It targets prominent Muslim women by putting up their images online for auction as prostitutes. 6 months ago, another app auctioned scores of Muslim women in India. No one was charged for that until a similar app popped up on New Year's Day. This latest app has resulted in arrests. Indian Muslim women have been leading the protest movement against discriminatory citizenship laws passed by the government, which has prompted harassment.
Indian extremists are auctioning off Muslim women. Sulli Deals is an app created for this auction. It was launched July the 4th on GitHub. Call it misogyny or call it Islamophobia. For Muslim women, it is a major threat, not a joke. Putting up women's photos, names, and contact information is very dangerous, especially in Delhi, referred to as the rape capital of the world. But Muslim women are the ones who really bother Hindutva leaders. Muslim women led the strongest and longest resistance to anti-Muslim citizenship laws. They were the champions of the Shaheen Bagh protest. These laws were designed to make Indian Muslims into non-citizens. This is just the way the Burmese genocide of Rohingyas began. They sat protesting peacefully. Hindutva men could not tolerate women speaking up, much less Muslim women. Here is Aisha Rena standing up to protect a male university student being beaten by police.
धरती तो ये गुलजार है, पैरों तले अंगार है.
Here is Iqra Khan, who became the poetress of the protest. Here is Nabia Khan, who was put on auction in this Hindutva app.
Every emotion I express on social media is met with threats of sexual violence, abuses.
They launched this app essentially against Muslim women leaders. It puts up Muslim women leaders for auction. Hena Khan is a pilot. She found herself being auctioned there. She counted 83 other Muslim women's photos on the app before giving up. They chose activists, journalists, artists, and researchers. The name of the app is Sulli Deal. Sulli is the N-word for Muslim woman used by Hindutva extremists.
It's not just patriarchy, misogyny, and rape culture. It is all of these three things coupled with Islamophobia. You have sleepless nights because you know law will never protect you.
Nabia Khan is right, and Kapil Mishra is the proof.
सीसीपी साहब हमारे सामने खड़े हैं. मैं आप सबके बिहाफ पे ये बात कह रहा हूँ, ट्रंप के जाने तक तो हम शांति से जा रहे हैं, लेकिन उसके बाद हम आपकी भी नहीं सुनेंगे अगर रास्ते खाली नहीं हुए तो. ठीक है.
While President Trump was having tea with Modi in Delhi, Mishra started the riot. Seeing him standing next to a police chief on February 23, 2020, he threatened to attack peaceful Muslim women protesters. Mishra said he is making the police chief his witness. He then carried out this threat by unleashing a Hindutva mob at Muslims. "53 people were killed, but he is still free. In fact, even the police got involved attacking Muslims. Nothing happened to Kapil Mishra. He is free. A judge even asked to file a case against him, but he remains free. And nothing will happen to the Hindutva IT extremists auctioning off Muslim women. They will remain free. Unfortunately, Gandhi's India has been taken over by his killers.
A German court on Thursday sentenced a former Syrian colonel to life in prison for crimes against humanity. The historic verdict marked the end of the first global trial over state-sponsored torture in Syria. Anwar Razlan was found guilty of overseeing the murder of 27 people at the Al-Khatib detention center in Damascus in 2011 and 2012. He sought refuge in Germany after deserting the Syrian regime in 2012. Prosecutors accused Razlan of overseeing the murder of 58 people and the torture of 4,000 others at the center. The case was brought using the legal principle of universal jurisdiction. This allows offenses to be prosecuted even if they were committed in a different country. Other such cases have also sprung up in Germany, France, and Sweden, as Syrians who have sought refuge in Europe turn to the only legal means currently available to them. An Indonesian court sentenced a Muslim cleric to 5 months in prison for blasphemy against Christians. Muhammad Yahya Waloni is a Muslim convert from Christianity. On January 11th, a South Jakarta district court convicted Waloni of posting hate speech online that could cause inter-religious divisions. Waloni called the Holy Bible a work of fiction in one of his sermons posted on YouTube. He was ordered to pay a fine of $3,600 or risk another month in prison. Petrus Salentinus, a Catholic layman and chairperson of a lawyers group, said Waloni got off lightly. A British Jewish leader has resigned following comments he made about Muslims. Gary Mond, Vice President of the Board of Deputies of British Jews and Treasurer of the UK branch of the Jewish National Fund, wrote on Facebook that all civilization is at war with Islam. A senior member of British Jewry, main communal organization, Mond resigned after being suspended over his hostile social media posts towards Muslims. Mond's other social media activity was unearthed by a news investigation. His suspension followed a report on Wednesday in the Jewish News of London about his social media interactions in recent years. It found that Mond had liked on Facebook 2 posts by Kamala Geller, a Jewish American anti-Islam activist. A demolition drive in a tribal Muslim area by the Jammu Development Authority, or JDA, has sparked protests in Jammu and Kashmir. The drive left more than a dozen tribals homeless. Local tribal Muslims accused the JDA of selectively targeting them. Muskan Chaudhry told Two Circles that a JDA team, along with a police demolition team, demolished their homes with bulldozers in the early hours of January 11th without serving any notices. Chaudhry said that the demolition has left 12 families homeless. They've been living there since 1947. More than a dozen structures were razed in the Roopnagar area of the Jammu district. South Africa launched 3 locally produced NANO satellites into space on Thursday. It was part of a U.S. aerospace company SpaceX's Transporter 3 mission. It marks the first launch of a satellite constellation developed entirely on the African continent. According to a government statement and a live webcast by SpaceX, the NANO satellites will launch from Cape Canaveral in Florida. The satellites will help monitor South Africa's waters from illegal fishing and other activities. The South African government said that the launch of the Maritime Domain Awareness Satellite constellation is a significant milestone for the country. The Islamic Developmental Bank has launched a $1 billion financing plan to support renewable energy. Working with the Arab Petroleum Investment Corporation, the initiative will support utility projects in the 57-member Organization of Islamic Cooperation countries. The funds will be for electricity generation and transmission projects using renewable energy or natural gas, as well as water and waste management facilities. The financing will initially run for a 3-year period. TUFAIL Ahmed, who founded Maryland's Montgomery County Muslim Foundation, or MCMF, died Thursday, according to a statement from the organization. Ahmed died in Pakistan while visiting his home country. He worked tirelessly to uplift the needy, the statement read. He came to Montgomery County with his family in 1973. After the 9/11 attacks, Ahmed urged Muslims to get involved in community service. He created MCMF, a grassroots group encouraging the Muslim community's involvement in county affairs and community service. Ahmed was also the chairman of the MCMF board. In 2018, he was awarded the county's Roscoe R. Nix Distinguished Community Leadership Award. In his tribute to Ahmed, County Executive Mark Elrich stated, "We lost a great community member. TUFAIL was a pillar in our community and a major presence in the Muslim community. I knew him for more than 20 years as a tireless leader for justice and as a gentle and compassionate human being that I have ever had the honor of working with. He saw us all as a part of the human family. He worked tirelessly for everyone in Montgomery County and never grew weary of striving to do more and better. I will miss him as a friend and partner in the work to build a more just and understanding society. And Montgomery County will miss him as someone who always strove to be the best person that he could be." Coming up next after the break is our in-depth analysis segment, so stay tuned and we'll be right back after these messages.
If I could be you, and you could be me for just 1 hour. If we could find a way to get inside each other's minds. Walk a mile in my shoes. Walk a mile in my shoes. Well, before you abuse, criticize, and accuse. Walk a mile in my shoes.
There are 16 million children struggling with hunger in America. That's 1 in 5 daughters, sons, neighbors, and classmates who don't know where their next meal is coming from. Yet billions of pounds of good food go to waste every year. It's time we do something about it. Feeding America is a nationwide network of food banks that helps provide meals to millions of kids and families in need. Visit feedingamerica.org to help them feed even more. Together, we can solve hunger. Together, we're feeding America.
Our fellow Americans.
Right now, the COVID-19 vaccines are available to millions of Americans.
And soon, they will be available to everyone.
The science is clear. These vaccines will protect you and those you love from this dangerous and deadly disease.
They could save your life.
So we urge you to get vaccinated when it's available to you.
That's the first step to ending the pandemic and moving our country forward. It's up to you.
Welcome back. For our in-depth analysis segment, let's go to Imam Abdul Malik Mujahid. Over to you, Imam Mujahid.
Thank you, Hena. Question is what President Biden is going to do now. His agenda seems to be over. I mean, he was, not many people were there to welcome him in Georgia when he went and declared that he will support abolition of filibuster for this purpose. And it is clear that it's not going to happen because of the 2 senators. So what is he going to do about it? And what is happening to our democracy? Is the system working the way it was conceived? To discuss all of that, we have with us Professor Gregory KOGER. Welcome to Muslim Network TV.
And thank you for having me.
Gregory KOGER is a professor of political science at the University of Miami and specializes in legislative politics and political parties. So voting rights is a pillar of democracy. It helps us resolve our issues. How are we doing on that?
Well, I mean, right now, voting rights are They are in question across the country, as in a lot of states are passing laws and make it a little bit harder for people to vote. One of the things we learned in 2020 is that if anybody can mail in a ballot, it actually makes it so much easier to vote. But a lot of states are passing laws to actually make it harder to vote by mail, and that's unfortunate, right? It's taking democracy away from full participation and towards making it harder for people to vote unless they can physically attend to the polls on election day.
So, if it is difficult to vote, you just mentioned a little bit difficult to vote. People can live by a little bit of difficulty.
I'm sorry, people can do what without difficulty?
Yeah, you mentioned that the states are making a little bit difficult. Why so many people up in arm if it is not much of a difficult situation?
Well, so I mean, the broader theory of how people vote is that, um, people decide if they want to vote. They're motivated by patriotism or belief that one candidate is better than another. But on the other hand, there is a possible difficulty in voting, and they compare how much they want to vote to how hard it is to vote, and that has something to do with the way that they're living their lives, right? If you are a senior citizen, you're especially likely to vote in this country because you have, on average, a little bit more free time than other people. Whereas if you are an American who is, working 2 or 3 jobs to get by, who has lots of kids or parents to take care of, it can be hard, to make time to go out and vote. And especially if once you get to the polls, you find that there is a long line of people waiting. And so if policymakers want people to vote in this country, they should try to make it as easy as possible. And that it means making sure there are plenty of places to vote or giving alternatives to voting in person on election day. Like living in Florida, I personally tend to vote early. I find a day that when nobody's at the voting site and show up, and it typically takes me 5 to 10 minutes. But what states can do and have done in Florida is make it a little bit harder to vote early by shortening the number of days when early voting is available. Especially sometimes states will at least consider proposals to eliminate voting early on a Sunday, which is especially targeted at African-American voters who tend to go to church and then as a church go to the polls. So there's things that states can do to manipulate how hard it is for people to vote. And the people who are often deterred by these laws are people who otherwise wouldn't have a lot of free time. And that's why it matters, what sort of laws we have as a state, and Congress is considering proposals to sort of create a national standard of who can vote and how they should be able to vote.
But in this situation that President Biden is unable to, push it forward because 2 of the conservative Democrats don't want to go along. What are the chances of federal government being able to do anything before coming elections?
That is a great question. Yes. I mean, the Democrats have 2 great challenges. One is that they have a very narrow majority in the Senate. It's a 51-50 majority if Vice President Harris votes, and that is the basis of their majority status. And then, yes, obviously, if they want to bring a bill to a final vote, they need to be able to shut off debate, which by Senate rules requires 60 votes. Or nobody else wants to debate a bill. And so on the election bill that's now pending before the Senate, the challenge is that Republicans won't vote to limit their own debate. And there are, as you say, 2 Democrats who won't vote to limit debate or to change the rules of the Senate. So where does that leave Democrats? One option is that they try to drag out the debate until the Republicans have all had their chance to speak. There's actually a limit of 2 speeches per person on a single topic in the Senate. And if the Democrats are willing to keep the bill on the floor indefinitely, then eventually the Republicans will all have had their say. Senators haven't fought out a bill like that in a long, long time. And my research in my book Filibustering it basically explains why that doesn't happen anymore. It's because time is too precious to members of the majority party to keep a bill on the floor as long as it would take. But on this issue, if Democrats are passionate enough, they will just keep the bill on the floor and see if Republicans get exhausted and are ready to let the bill come to a final vote.
The challenges to democracy are being discussed from many angles. I mean, a couple of Army former generals, they wrote that military need to prepare for the next election, that these type of things going to happen, which happened on January 6th. On the other side, President Carter has written in New York Times about the risk of civil war. So democracy is a process of resolving dispute and getting over with whatever it is, whoever wins, and let that person do their job. Now, do you think not being able to pass a voting right bill is going to create more possibility of conflict in a country where we have more guns than people in people's hand?
Yes, in this sense, like people, the bedrock of a democracy is that all sorts of people, no matter who they vote for, agree to choose their leaders by elections, which means that they have to believe that the elections are fair. If this election reform doesn't pass through Congress, it creates a potential that there's less confidence in the electoral process. In particular, one part of the Democrats' bill is just to restore protection for civil rights across the country by restoring the pre-clearance provisions of the Voting Rights Act. In 2013, the Supreme Court said that it invalidated a part of the Voting Rights Act, which said that some states and counties have to get permission from the Justice Department if they're going to change their election rules or regulations. Once the Supreme Court struck that pre-clearance provision down, a number of states then enacted laws which made it harder for some people to vote, and in particular, which had racial components, that they made it harder for African Americans to vote or other racial minorities. And those laws would have been blocked if the Voting Rights Act had been in effect. And ever since, it has delegitimized our electoral process a little bit to see elected leaders trying to make it harder for some people to vote along racial and ethnic lines, just so their party has a better chance of winning elections. So I think if the Democrats could pass that part of their bill, it would restore fairness to the process and increase people's trust. Now, in the absence of that, and in the absence of leaders of both parties who embrace the democratic process and accept its results, yes, we do have the potential for increased violence, as neither side is willing to submit to letting the other side rule.
How many times in history we have arrived at this moment as today?
I mean, the worst historical parallel is the 1860 presidential election, in which 11 states in the southern United States simply decided they didn't want to live under the presidency of Abraham Lincoln and attempted to secede, leading to one of the most deadly conflicts in American history. So, I mean, that's a parallel. A little less extreme is a period that followed the Civil War, in which there are a number of states, again in the South primarily, but not exclusively, that enacted voting laws that in the South favored white Democrats, but around the rest of the country, favored whichever party was in charge. And so on the surface, we still had a democracy all across the United States, but in practice, there were a lot of sort of entrenched elites that could not be driven out of power. And that is slightly closer to where we are now, that in the absence of federal oversight of elections, we'll see sort of local entrenched parties that are in power not because people necessarily support them, but because they enacted a set of laws which make it easy for their own voters to vote and make it hard for people who are likely to vote against them to vote. In some states, there are currently legislative districts drawn for state legislators, which guarantee that the current majority party will continue to be the majority party, no matter how many people vote for the other party. That sort of thing undermines democracy, and it brings us to a situation in which we have elections, and elections seem to have results, but in practice, power is its own source of power. That's not stable.
Tell us this, Professor KOGER, that President Biden knew pretty well that two of the Democratic conservative not going to come along. How come he still went ahead in Georgia, announced that he will support the, breaking the filibuster or getting rid of it to pass the voting right bill?
So obviously for the second half of 2021, what the congressional Democrats and President Biden were trying to do was pass a large budget bill, which had a lot of social welfare components to it, known as the Build Back Better Act. And what the Democrats found there was that unless people are forced to declare what their positions are or to actually cast votes, they will remain ambiguous, and sort of the negotiation process will just go on forever. And I think, the same logic applies to this situation. There have been public pronouncements by these two senators that they won't support filibuster reform, but at the same time, they claim to support the underlying election bills. And yet some hints that maybe there are some things that they open to. And unless the Democrats actually bring this bill on the floor, force a conversation that has to have an end within the next couple of weeks, we'll continue to be in the situation in which nothing actually happens and nobody knows exactly why. So, a worst case scenario, the Democrats just vote, and we find out that, in fact, it's a 48-52 vote, and the two Democrats are unwilling to go along with any reform efforts. And fine, we can do that, but at least it'll be on the record, as opposed to this sort of, keeping the bill off the floor of the Senate, continuing to have these backroom negotiations that go on until the 2022 election. At some point, we have to have a public conversation and force people to make a decision out in public. I think that is the goal of the Democrats in this process.
So, Professor KOGER, seeing what we are seeing at the Senate and the Congress level, and elections are coming up, what do you think President Biden will be able to do in the next 3 years?
Well, that depends, first of all, a great deal on the 2022 elections. Right now, as a political scientist, I have to say the traditional models would predict a Republican success. That there's a very narrow Democratic majority in the House and Senate, and the president's party typically loses seats in midterm elections unless the president is exceedingly popular or the economy is doing extraordinarily well. So right now, it doesn't look great for Democrats. And so 2023, 2024, if the Republicans win one chamber or both of Congress, it'll be a time of conflict and just barely trying to negotiate to do the bare basic things that Congress has to do: fund the government and raise the debt limit, and then otherwise conflict. And for the rest of 2022, I don't know. The best scenario would be for the Democrats to finalize the Build Back Better Act and then do something on elections one way or another, but at least, come to a resolution about what the outcome is going to be, and then try to find some common ground with Republicans on other issues. But I really don't expect that to happen. And then, in the absence of some sort of compromise on the Republicans' part, the Democrats will process nominations through the Senate. That's what I would expect to see.
Well, thank you so much, Professor KOGER, for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Take care.
All right.
Back to you, Hena.
Thank you so much, Imam Mujahid. That's all from our Washington studios tonight. Thank you for tuning in. You can find previous episodes and more on our YouTube or Facebook. For more content, keep watching Muslim Network TV or visit muslimnetwork.tv. Assalamu alaikum and good night.